Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you to reflect on a profound and comforting truth. God is going to improve your situation. This may sound like a bold promise, but it is one rooted deeply in the very nature of the divine and how he works in the lives of those who place their trust in him. We all face difficulties, and it is part of the human condition to encounter obstacles, whether they be in our personal lives, our families, our careers, or our relationships. But here's the thing, these struggles are not the end of the story. In fact, they are often the very beginning of something greater. God's improvement in our lives often begins in the midst of these struggles. When we are confronted with hardships, it is easy to feel that we are lost in a sea of uncertainty. But it is precisely in these moments that God is working behind the scenes. Divine intervention is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, like the subtle shifting of a landscape after a storm, but always purposeful. Improvement does not always come in the form we expect. It may not be an immediate resolution, but a process, a change in perspective, or a slow transformation in our hearts. Trust that God's timing is perfect. What seems like a delay is often preparation for something far greater. In times of struggle, we are called to remember that growth is often birthed from adversity. Just as a seed must break through the soil before it can reach for the light, so must we face challenges in order to become the people we are destined to be. Every hardship holds the potential for growth, and through each trial, God is molding us, refining us, and making us ready for the blessings he has prepared for us. What is required of us in this process? Faith. Faith is the fuel that sustains us through the darkest of times. It is the belief that no matter how bleak the situation seems, God has not abandoned us. In fact, it is in those moments that we often find his presence most near. To have faith is to believe that the divine is working on our behalf, orchestrating a future for us that is far beyond what we can imagine. When we speak of hope and trust in divine providence, we are acknowledging a central truth that is both comforting and challenging. Human life is filled with periods of difficulty, seasons when we may feel overwhelmed, lost, or without direction. However, the very essence of faith teaches us that these moments of distress are not meaningless or purposeless. In fact, they often serve as the fertile ground for divine transformation and improvement. To fully grasp this concept, one must first understand that divine providence is not limited to the positive moments in life, but is most profoundly seen in the way God meets us in our struggles. Hope is not merely a passive feeling of optimism, but an active choice to trust that there is a greater plan at work, even when the current circumstances suggest otherwise. It is the assurance that despite appearances, God is still present, still involved, and still working on our behalf. Trust in divine providence means placing our confidence in the belief that God sees beyond our immediate challenges and is using even the most difficult experiences to shape our future. There is often a temptation to see struggles and adversity as signs of abandonment, but a deeper understanding of faith reminds us that hardship is not evidence that God has forsaken us. On the contrary, these difficulties may be indicators that God is at work in our lives in ways we cannot yet comprehend. Many of us find ourselves asking, why is this happening to me, or why am I being tested in this way? It is a natural human response to question the presence of a loving God in the face of suffering. However, Scripture and tradition tell us that God's ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are not our thoughts. What appears to be a hardship in the moment may be a necessary step in our spiritual or personal development. Consider how God used the struggles of biblical figures as catalysts for profound change and growth. Joseph's betrayal by his brothers, for example, seemed like the ultimate act of injustice. Yet in the end, it was through his years of hardship that Joseph came to understand his unique role in saving many lives. His trust in God's providence, despite the immense difficulty he faced, led to an outcome far beyond what he could have imagined. This is a powerful reminder that when we are in the midst of challenges, we may not see the broader picture. However, God's plan often involves a process that takes time, and it is through these processes that we are shaped into the individuals we are meant to become. This brings us to a critical aspect of divine providence. God's ways are not always immediate or clear. Divine intervention often unfolds gradually, and this can be frustrating for those of us who seek instant solutions or answers. Yet this very delay, this apparent absence of immediate action, is part of the divine wisdom. Think of a gardener tending to a plant. The gardener knows the right amount of sunlight, water, and care needed, and sometimes, despite our impatience, the plant must go through stages of growth before it blooms. The gardener's expertise is not in forcing immediate results, but in allowing nature to follow its course, confident that the final outcome will be beautiful and fruitful. And in much the same way, God's providence works in the lives of individuals. When we are in a difficult situation, we may wish for immediate relief, but it is often in the waiting that we learn the most profound lessons. We may grow in character, patience, and resilience, learning that trusting God's plan is not contingent on our immediate satisfaction, but on our willingness to believe that God's timing is always perfect. This leads us to a second key aspect of hope and trust in divine providence: the transformative power of God's involvement in our lives. When we trust that God is at work, even in the most difficult circumstances, we open ourselves to the possibility of profound transformation. It is in the crucible of difficulty that we are refined, much like gold is purified in fire. The trials we face serve to strip away our attachments to lesser things, exposing our true needs and desires. Through this process, God draws us closer to Himself, revealing aspects of His character, His patience, His faithfulness, His compassion that we may never have recognized without the challenges. Trusting in divine providence means trusting in God's ultimate goodness. Even when life is hard, God remains good, and He works all things together for good, as Scripture assures us. This does not mean that everything that happens is good in itself. Certainly many things are painful and unjust. However, it means that God is able to take even our worst experiences and use them for a purpose that aligns with His will for our lives. This ultimate goodness is a source of great hope, because it assures us that our struggles are not without meaning, and that God will bring something good from them. Hope and trust in divine providence encourage a posture of surrender. When we place our hope in God, we are not denying the reality of our problems, but we are choosing to trust that God is bigger than those problems. We surrender our own limited understanding of how things should unfold and embrace the truth that God's vision for our lives is far grander and more complete than anything we could imagine. This act of surrender is not a passive resignation to fate, but an active choice to rest in the knowledge that God's plan is always for our ultimate good, even when we cannot immediately see the outcome. Through this trust, we experience the peace that surpasses all understanding, because we know that we are not alone in our struggles. The nature of divine timing. Divine timing is an essential concept for understanding how God operates in our lives, and it is often one of the most perplexing aspects of the faith journey. It is the recognition that God's ways of working are not only beyond human comprehension, but are also far more perfect than we can imagine. Divine timing teaches us that everything unfolds according to God's perfect will, and while we may not always see the immediate results we hope for, it is through the waiting that deeper growth and understanding take place. This is not merely about patience, it is about trusting that God knows what is best and when it is best to bring about the changes we need in our lives. The first thing to acknowledge is that God's timing is not the same as our timing. We live in a world defined by seconds, minutes, and hours, where everything is driven by a sense of urgency. In our society, we are conditioned to expect immediate results, quick answers, and rapid solutions. Technology, communication, and entertainment have all contributed to an environment where instant gratification is not only possible but expected. However, when it comes to divine timing, we must learn to surrender our need for immediate resolution and accept that God's clock operates on a completely different scale. The delay, while often frustrating, is not an indication of neglect or abandonment. Rather, it is a part of God's divine orchestration of events that will ultimately serve a higher purpose. Consider the story of Abraham and Sarah. They were promised by God that they would become the parents of a great nation, yet they faced the profound disappointment of not having children for many years. As they grew older, their hope waned, and they even took matters into their own hands, attempting to fulfill God's promise through human effort. However, it was only when Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was well past the age of childbearing that the promise was fulfilled. God's timing, which seemed delayed by human standards, was ultimately perfect. The child born, Isaac, was not just a fulfillment of God's promise to them, but also the beginning of a much larger plan that would unfold over generations. In this story, we see that God's timing was not about rushing to meet Abraham and Sarah's desires, but about setting the stage for a greater purpose that they could not yet see. This leads to a deeper understanding. Divine timing often appears to be delayed because God is preparing us for what is to come. When we pray, when we long for change, we often expect an immediate response, and when that does not happen, we question whether God is listening or whether He cares. However, God is not ignoring us. Rather, He is preparing us for something that will require more than just our desires. It may take longer than expected because it involves the alignment of multiple factors, both seen and unseen, that will lead to a greater outcome. Our character, our relationships, and even the circumstances around us may need time to develop in a way that allows us to fully receive and appreciate the blessings that are on their way. God's timing is intricately connected to His purpose. When God works in our lives, He does so with a vision that is far grander than we can perceive. What seems like a delay might in fact be the necessary period for our personal growth. Often it is only in hindsight that we can understand why certain events happened at specific times. We may look back and realize that God's perfect timing spared us from making a decision that we were not ready for, or prevented us from entering into something that would have caused us harm. What appears as an unanswered prayer may very well be God's way of guarding us from making choices that would have set us back in the long run. Think of the Israelites' journey through the wilderness. God promised to bring them into the promised land, yet their journey was not direct. It took them 40 years to reach their destination, a journey that could have taken much less time. From a human perspective, this might appear as inefficiency or even failure on God's part. However, divine timing was at play. The wilderness was not just a physical journey, it was a spiritual preparation. The Israelites needed time to learn trust, dependence, and obedience. They needed to be shaped into a people who could fully appreciate the blessings of the promised land and steward them in a way that would honor God. God's delay was not a sign of failure, it was a time of shaping, of refining, and of making them ready for what lay ahead. In light of this, we must also acknowledge that God's delays are often for our benefit, even when we do not understand them. The time between prayer and answer, between desire and fulfillment, is often a time of character formation. While we may pray fervently for a solution to our problems, God may be using that very waiting period to prepare us emotionally, mentally, and spiritually for the answers He is going to provide. This is especially true when it comes to personal growth. There are certain virtues like patience, perseverance, and humility that can only be developed when we are made to wait. Through waiting, we are also learning to trust, and trust is an essential component of any relationship, especially with God. The delays and the waiting periods become the very crucibles in which our faith is refined and strengthened. Another key aspect of divine timing is that it often involves the involvement of others. We may want something to happen in our lives, but God's plan may involve the coordination of multiple individuals, circumstances, or events that we cannot see from our limited perspective. This is why some prayers are delayed, because they are intricately tied to a larger plan that requires others to be in the right place at the right time. For example, you may pray for a new job, but God's plan may involve connecting you with someone you have not yet met, someone whose life is also being shaped in the same way. The timing of this connection may take months or even years to come to fruition, but when it does, it will be a perfect alignment of divine purpose. Divine timing is often about learning to rest in God's sovereignty. There is a peace that comes when we truly accept that God knows exactly what He is doing. His delays are not a sign of negligence, rather, they are a testament to His sovereignty. Trusting in divine timing means trusting that everything is unfolding as it should, even when we cannot see the end of the road. It is learning to rest in the assurance that God is in control and His plans for us are always good, even when we face moments of uncertainty. Growth through struggle. The idea that we grow through struggle is both a comforting and challenging concept, particularly when faced with difficulties that seem overwhelming or unjust. However, within the context of divine providence, struggle is not seen as a sign of failure or punishment, but as an integral part of the spiritual and personal growth process. Throughout human history, individuals have often found that the most significant moments of growth occur not in times of ease, but during times of hardship. Struggle has the unique capacity to stretch us beyond our natural limits, developing qualities in us that may never emerge in moments of comfort or ease. At the core of this idea is the understanding that struggle refines our character. The human tendency is to seek pleasure and avoid pain, to desire comfort over discomfort. Yet the reality of life is that growth often requires discomfort. Just as gold is refined through fire, our character is refined through the heat of adversity. Struggle serves as the crucible in which our true nature is revealed. It is through facing difficulty that we discover our resilience, patience, and strength. Without struggle, we may never fully realize the depth of our character or our capacity for endurance. Challenges force us to confront our weaknesses and limitations, offering us the opportunity to overcome them. Think about the process of physical training. Athletes subject themselves to intense physical strain in order to build strength and endurance. The muscle fibers tear and break down under pressure, only to rebuild stronger than before. This is a metaphor for the way struggles work in our lives. They break us down emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually, but in doing so, they build us back up, often in ways that we could not have achieved without the struggle. Every setback, every failure, every hardship becomes the raw material from which we are shaped and transformed. But growth through struggle is not limited to personal development. It often teaches us lessons that we would not learn otherwise. When we are in the midst of hardship, our perspectives change. We are forced to reevaluate our priorities, our values, and our understanding of what truly matters. Often, what seemed important before a struggle may lose its significance once we have been through the fire. For example, A person who faces a serious illness may come to realize the preciousness of health and the fleeting nature of time, while someone who has suffered a financial setback may gain a deeper appreciation for the importance of relationships over material possessions. These realizations often come not through moments of ease, but through the trials that force us to look beyond the surface and delve into the deeper meaning of life. To this, struggles also lead us to greater dependence on God. When life is going well, it is easy to feel self-sufficient and independent. We may rely on our own abilities, talents, and resources to navigate through life. However, when we face overwhelming difficulties, we often find ourselves in a place where our own strength is insufficient, and we are forced to turn to a higher power. It is in these moments of vulnerability that our faith deepens. Struggle has the power to strip away our illusions of control, leaving us with only one option: to lean on God's strength, wisdom, and providence. Through this process, we come to realize that we are not alone in our struggles, and that God is using the challenge to draw us closer to Him. This dependence on God through struggle also strengthens our sense of hope and trust in divine provision. As we experience the faithfulness of God in the midst of hardship, our trust in His ability to provide and protect grows. Even when the situation seems bleak and the road ahead is uncertain, the memory of past struggles and God's intervention builds a foundation of hope that sustains us through future difficulties. The struggles we face become a testimony to God's ability to turn challenges into blessings, reminding us that no hardship is ever wasted when placed in His hands. Struggle has the potential to transform our relationships with others. When we endure hardship, we often become more empathetic toward others who are suffering. Having walked through the fire ourselves, we gain a deeper understanding of what others are going through. This empathy fosters connection and allows us to be a source of comfort and encouragement to those around us. Struggling together with others can also create strong bonds of support and community, which are essential during times of difficulty. A person who has faced the same or similar struggles can offer wisdom, guidance, and practical help, showing us that we are not alone and that there is strength in unity. Beyond personal and relational growth, struggle also gives birth to perseverance. Life's trials teach us to keep going, even when things seem impossible. When we emerge from a difficult situation, we often find that we are more resilient than we initially thought. The struggle teaches us the value of persistence and the importance of pressing forward even when the path is unclear. Perseverance is a trait that cannot be cultivated in easy times. It is born out of adversity. By continuing to push through life's challenges, we develop the mental and emotional fortitude to face whatever comes our way in the future. We become stronger, more capable, and more prepared for the challenges that lie ahead. Struggles also prepare us for greater responsibilities. Just as a child must grow into adulthood through various stages of learning and experience, so too must we be prepared for the roles and responsibilities that God has in store for us. Often it is through struggle that we are trained to handle larger responsibilities, whether it is the responsibility of leadership, stewardship, or personal care. We learn through our struggles what it means to carry weight, to make sacrifices, and to act with integrity. The trials we face become a form of preparation for the greater things that God has planned for us in the future. The transformative power of struggle is not always immediately visible. Sometimes we may not see the purpose behind our suffering until much later. However, as we endure the hardship and allow God to work in our lives, we eventually come to realize that struggle was never just a burden, it was a tool for our development. In this way, struggle becomes a paradox. It is at once painful and yet essential for our growth. It is through the difficulty that we are shaped, strengthened, and made ready for the greater things God has in store for us. In the end, Growth through struggle is an essential part of the human experience. It is how we become who we are meant to be. Without it, we would remain stagnant, untested, and unprepared for the life that lies ahead. Through struggle, we learn to rely on God, to grow in character, and to see the world and others through a new lens. We emerge from our challenges not as the same person, but as someone more fully formed and more deeply connected to the divine purpose that guides our lives.